Millionaire CEO couldn't stand a woman's touch, until the girl who saved his grandma melted him. They say there are people in this world who can't feel love, not because they're heartless, but because somewhere along the way, love hurt too much to hold. He lived alone behind glass walls, where no hand had ever reached and no voice had ever stayed. Until one rainy afternoon, a stranger touched him, not with her fingers, but with the kind of gentleness that doesn't ask for anything in return. And something inside him broke, not in pain, but in the way a locked door finally opens, to someone who never stopped knocking, and the man behind the glass. A gray afternoon in downtown Seattle, a tech product launch at Whitaker Tower, and a flower pot falling from the sky. Noah Whitaker had built a world no one could enter. Not because he wanted to be alone, but because solitude was safer than a hand he didn't recognize, a voice that tried to get too close, or a memory that wouldn't stay where he left it. To the outside world, he was a modern titan, CEO of Whitaker Dynamics, ocean of the future. And yet, inside every boardroom and interview room, there was always a very real distance, like the space between two panes of glass. No one touched him, and no one asked why, not since he was 12. But that day, something changed. It started with a sound, sharp, jarring, the thud of ceramic shattering against concrete. Esther Whitaker, 84 years old and stubborn as ever, had wandered out of her hired car before her security detail caught up. She was standing on the sidewalk, humming to herself, staring up at the massive LED screen flashing her grandson's face, when the flower pot dropped from the 5th-floor balcony above. It was Lena Carter who saw it first. 27. Tired. Running on 4 hours of sleep and $3 in her bank account. She had been biking to the cafe across from the tower where she worked part-time, late as usual, when something, call it instinct or just dumb luck, told her to look up. Dropped the bike, lunged forward and slammed her shoulder into the old woman, sending them both sprawling to... The old woman blinked. Lena's elbow was scraped raw. They both sat there in stunned silence. Then Esther laughed, a loud, raspy, delighted laugh. "You tackle like a linebacker, darling," she said, wheezing. "You've saved my damn life." Lena flushed. "I just saw it falling." A crowd gathered. Security came running. Someone called an ambulance. Lena tried to disappear into the noise. But Esther grabbed her wrist, not roughly, but like someone who hadn't held a warm hand in a long time. "What's your name?" she asked. "Lena," she said, brushing dirt from her jeans. "Lena Carter." "I'm Esther," the old woman smiled. "You're coming with me." Noah was not pleased. He arrived at Harborview Medical Center wearing his usual uniform, black turtleneck, charcoal coat, gloves, always gloves. Esther was fine, just shaken. The girl who saved her, sitting by the window with a hospital cup of apple juice, wearing ripped jeans, a rain-streaked denim jacket, and a look that said she didn't want to be noticed. But no one noticed her. Not because she was striking, though she was in a quiet kind of way, but because she was calm, unafraid, unimpressed, and not trying to touch him. That alone made her different from most of the people he met. Esther, of course, made introductions in the way she always did, boldly and without warning. "This is my grandson Noah," she said, sipping her tea. "He's the one with all the money but none of the manners." Noah gave a polite nod. "Lena Carter," Esther added, "is the only reason I'm not in a morgue right now." "Thank you," Noah said flatly, but there was no warmth in it. Lena shrugged. Anyone would have done it. "No," Noah replied, his tone clipped. "They wouldn't have." Esther leaned back, smiling at the tension. "You know," she said slowly, "you should hire her." Noah blinked. "For what?" "Whatever. You need someone human around you." "I have employees." "You don't have anyone who makes you laugh?" Lena stood to leave. "I should get going." "9," Esther interrupted, firm now. "You're staying, at least until I'm out of this place." Lena froze. Noah stared at her grandmother, frowning. That's not necessary. Neither is loneliness, Esther said, turning her eyes on him with a softness that made him look away. But here we are. Later that night, back at the Whitaker estate, a sprawling mansion on Queen Anne Hill, Lena stood in the guest room, staring out the rain-speckled window. She was supposed to be gone, supposed to go back to her shifts and textbooks and half-finished scholarship essays. But something about that grandmother's voice had cracked her wide open. "You're always welcome," Esther had said, "especially when you don't feel like you are." Lena didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until it came out as a sob. In the hallway, Noah passed her door and paused. Something told him to knock, to say thank you again, to make some small gesture of acknowledgement. But he didn't. Instead, he walked back to his study, shut the door, and stared at the scar on the inside of his palm, the one no one ever saw beneath the gloves. He remembered the moment it happened. The wires. The cold. The voice that said, "This is for your good." Noah closed his eyes. It flinched when the flower pot fell. But he did flinch when the girl's hand brushed his shoulder, back at the hospital. Only for a second. But still, it didn't burn. And he didn't pull away. Chapter 1. The Girl Who Touched What Others Couldn't. Hospitals always smelled the same. Bleach and Lena Carter sat quietly in the corner of room 412, sipping ginger ale from a straw she hadn't asked for. The gray sky outside was so typical of Seattle, it almost felt staged, soft rain tapping the window in rhythmic melancholy. She glanced at the elderly woman asleep in the bed across from her, chest rising and falling in that fragile rhythm only old age knew. Esther Whitaker had fallen asleep mid-story. Something about her husband, an apricot orchard, and a rogue raccoon that had once stolen her wedding ring. Lena smiled faintly. It was the first time she'd smiled in days. The door clicked open behind her. He didn't speak when he entered. Lennon didn't need to turn. She felt him, like the way you feel when a storm walks into a room. Clean lines, expensive cologne, the brush of command in every step. She turned slowly. He was taller than she expected. Darker, too, like someone who'd spent more time in shadow than sunlight. "Noah," she said quietly. It wasn't a greeting, more like a recognition. "You're the one who saved her." His voice was neutral. Not cold, just airless. "I guess." He looked her over with a gaze so sharp she nearly checked herself for bruises. "Why?" Lena frowned. "Why?" "Okay." "Because a flower pot was falling from a balcony and she was under it." "That's not what I mean." She crossed her arms. "Then maybe try asking what you mean." He didn't like that. His jaw ticked slightly, and he glanced toward the sleeping woman in the bed. "She likes you," he said instead. "She's funny. She's manipulative." Noticed. He hesitated, then walked to the window. The distance was deliberate. He kept a good 5 feet between them. His hands were tucked into his coat pockets. His reflection in the glass looked even lonelier than he did in person. "I want you to stay with her at the house." Lena's brows lifted. "You're okay with that?" A beat passed. "We're agreeing anyway," he added. She waited, sensing the condition coming. His eyes flicked to her. One rule. Here it was. "No touching," he said, as if it were the most natural boundary in the world. Not accidental, not comfortably, not even casual. Lena blinked. "You think I'm planning to?" "It's not personal," he cut in. "It's clinical." Her stomach twisted, not in offense, but in ache. Because for the first time, she saw it. At the stillness, the gloves, the rigid line between himself and the world. "I long?" she asked before she could stop herself. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. 23 years. She nodded slowly. "Okay." Noah turned to leave, but paused at the door. "My grandmother," he said without looking at her. She doesn't ask for things without a reason. Neither do I, Lena replied. Their eyes met. It was the first time he didn't look through her. The Whitaker estate sat like a crown on the hill, regal and removed. That night, Lena wandered its halls like a ghost in borrowed pajamas. The guest wing smelled like lavender and cedar. Every corner was spotless, every light soft and indirect, as if even the architecture respected silence. Found herself in the kitchen at midnight, barefoot on warm tile, reaching for a glass of water when she heard it. And she turned. Noah stood in the doorway, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie loose, gloves off. Their eyes locked. He didn't speak. Neither did she. And yet, something passed between them. Not attraction, not fear, something quieter. Recognition. I didn't mean to wake anyone, she said. You didn't. She filled her glass. Can I ask you something? He didn't nod. He didn't need to. What's it like, she asked softly, to not want touch? His gaze was steady. It's not that I don't want it. Her breath caught. It's that I was trained to flinch from it. That one sentence shattered something in the air. Noah turned and left. No goodnight, no explanation. But Lena stood there long after, gripping the glass like it was the only thing tethering her to the ground. Because she understood now. He didn't hate touch. He feared it would hurt more than he could bear. Chapter 2. Deal that wasn't a deal. The scent of coffee drifted down the hallway long before Lena reached the kitchen. Not the burnt diner kind she was used to, but the rich, full-bodied kind you'd expect from a billionaire's espresso machine. The Whitaker estate was quiet that morning. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you feel like a sound might shatter the walls. Lena tiptoed down the marble steps, wearing Esther's oversized robe, her hair still damp from a quick shower. The events of the previous day, the flower pot, the hospital, the man in gloves, blurred in her mind like a fever dream. Except now, she was in his house, eating his food, following his grandmother's orders like a confused side character in someone else's life. She didn't belong here. But she didn't quite belong anywhere else either. Esther was already at the kitchen island, perched on a bar stool in a velvet tracksuit, sipping from a china cup like it was whiskey. Where you are, she grinned. Sleep all right? I think so. Good. I told Rosa to make those little croissant things you like. I never told you I liked croissants. You didn't have to. Your face did. Now sit. Lena obeyed. A moment later, a plate of warm mini croissants appeared in front of her, courtesy of a stone-faced housekeeper with swift hands and zero emotion. She took a bite. It was sinful. Esther grinned like a woman who had just won. And then, as if summoned by the sudden warmth in the room, Noah appeared. Hair damp. No tie. A dark sweater that somehow looked custom-stitched to his frame. He moved like a shadow, trained to avoid notice, even in his own home. Morning, Lena said, swallowing. He nodded once. Esther? Darling, she replied, far too casually. He looked at Lena. Do you have a plan? Today? To your life. Lena blinked. Esther rolled her eyes, subtle, as always. Noah kept his eyes on Lena. Particularly, she said, work, study, sleep, repeat. He didn't blink. You said you were in school? Community college. Nights. I'm studying bioethics. That caught him. A flicker of something in his eyes. Your job. Barista. I clean counters, steam oat milk, and get yelled at by teenagers who think espresso should taste like pumpkin spice. Esther snorted into her cup. Noah's lips twitched, almost but not quite a smile. Would you consider quitting? He asked. Lena raised an eyebrow. To do what? Brew your coffee instead? Full time, with my grandmother. She won't ask again, but she'll expect it. Gee, thanks for the warning. He reached into his back pocket and slid a folded sheet of paper across the marble. Is a contract. Lena didn't touch it. I'm not signing anything without reading it. You'd be an idiot if you did. Esther clapped her hands. Oh, I like this girl. Lena looked between them. So, just to be clear, I'm being offered a job at the house by a man who won't let me touch him, and a woman who tried to fake a heart attack so I'd stay? Correct, Noah said. Lena pushed her plate aside, crossed her arms. What's the catch? Ching touches. Pause. Still? I break the rule. Noah looked directly at her. Then you're gone. 3 hours later, Lena stood in the sunroom with a duster in one hand and a playlist of jazz floating from the vintage record player in the corner. The sun filtered in through tall windows, landing in soft golden patches across the floor. She could hear the distant shuffle of Esther's cane in the hallway, and she had signed the contract. Sort of. After crossing out half of it with a red pen. Now she was officially the live-in personal recovery companion and assistant, whatever that meant. At least she had her own room, a big one, with a view of the Puget Sound and a bathroom that had towel warmers. As she adjusted the books on the nearest shelf, she spotted something odd. A framed photo, black and white, faded. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, sitting stiffly on a wooden chair, arms at his sides, expression frozen. Noah. But younger. His face looked the same eyes, same brows, but the smile was wrong. Forced. Like someone had told him to smile for the photo, and he didn't understand why he had to. Her fingers brushed the edge of the frame. Don't touch that. She startled, turned, and nearly dropped it. Noah stood in the doorway, arms crossed, no gloves, no warning. I didn't mean. It's fine, he said quickly. Just be careful. She set the photo down. I was curious, she said softly. Is that you? Why? You looked sad. He shrugged. I was. Where was this taken? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped into the room, carefully avoiding the sunlit strips of floor. You don't have to be gentle, he said suddenly. Lena blinked. Excuse me? Why you ask questions? You don't have to be gentle. Everyone else is. I don't like it. She took a breath. Okay, then why do you flinch when people reach for you? He didn't flinch now. He just breathed, deep and slow. Because once, someone reached for me, and then didn't let go. Lena looked at him. He looked at the photo. And for a moment, the space between them didn't feel so sharp. The silence broke as Esther's voice called from down the hall. Noah, where's that girl? I need her to carry my laundry and lie to my bridge group about how much I'm walking. Lena smiled faintly. Duty calls. She brushed past Noah on her way out, her shoulder just barely grazing his arm. She froze. He didn't move, didn't tense. He just stood there, letting the contact stay. And then, she looked back. He was still staring at the photo. And maybe it was the light, but she could swear he was smiling. Chapter 3. Still human. The rain came down in sheets. Seattle, ever theatrical, had traded its misty drizzle for a full curtain of gray. Lena's shift at the cafe was supposed to end an hour ago, but Amanda called in sick and the manager gave her that look, the one that said, I know you need the hours. So she stayed, tied her apron tighter, pulled 3 espresso shots for a woman who didn't make eye contact, and gave the teenager in the corner his 4th free refill of drip coffee. By the time she stepped out into the alley behind the cafe, the rain had already soaked her sneakers. She didn't notice at first. Her eyes were locked on the tall, dark figure standing across the street. Noah. No coat, no umbrella, no gloves. His sweater clung to his frame like he'd stood in the storm just to prove he could. Lena didn't move. Neither did he. Then slowly, almost awkwardly, he crossed the street, water beating down his arms, curls flattening across his forehead. By the time he stepped into the shelter of the alleyway, his boots were leaving puddles behind him. "You're soaking wet," she said, blinking. "I noticed. Is something wrong?" "I don't know." She frowned. "Then why are you here?" "I didn't know where else to go." The words were so quiet she almost didn't hear them. And when he looked up, when their eyes locked, she understood. He wasn't asking for help. He wasn't making a scene. He was asking for a moment. A safe place. Pause. And she stepped aside. He followed her into the back of the cafe, where the warmth and clatter of steam made his wet clothes steam faintly. She handed him a clean barista towel, and he dried his face, awkwardly, like he didn't know where to begin. "Does your staff know?" she asked after. "Then, about the touch thing?" He shook his head. "They don't need to. I built my schedule around not being touched." Lena hesitated, then stepped behind the counter and made 2 cups of coffee. Hers was black, his was identical. When she handed it to him, their fingers brushed. Again, he didn't flinch. But this time, his breath caught. Like his body remembered how to react, but chose not to. "Why now?" she asked, sipping hers. "What do you mean?" "You've been avoiding physical contact your whole life. I brushed your arm last week and you looked like I punched you in the soul. But now you're here." He didn't answer. Instead, he stared into his cup like it held something holy. "I was a kid," he said slowly. "My father, my adoptive father, sent me to a research facility. He told me it was for gifted children, that it would help me control my mind. I believed him." Lena didn't interrupt. "They said they were testing my resilience. That's what they called it. Resilience. But all I remember is the cold, the lights, the chairs with leather straps, and the hands. Always hands. Gloved, ungloved, reaching, holding, forcing." He swallowed. "I don't remember anyone saying my name, just numbers, timers, reactions." Pause. "While I left, I told myself I would never let anyone touch me again, and for 23 years, I didn't." Lena set her cup down. He looked at her, for real this time. "Last week, when you touched my arm, it didn't burn." She tried to speak, failed. "It didn't make me want to run," he continued. "It made me feel real." The cafe was quiet. Even the machines had hushed. Lena stepped forward. Noah tensed, but didn't step back. "I'm not trying to fix you," she said, her voice soft. "I know. I'm not going to pity you. I know." "Good?" Because her hand was already reaching for his. And this time, he reached back. Later that night, back at the estate, Lena stood barefoot on the balcony. The storm hadn't stopped. The sky was painted in brushstrokes of charcoal and blue, the rain soft now, gentle, almost musical. She was about to go inside when the door opened behind her. Noah again. No coat, no gloves, just the same sweater, still damp. "I can sleep?" she asked. He stepped beside her, close enough to share her breath. "I used to think I was broken," he said without preamble. She looked up at him. "You're not." "I know that now." Silence. "I used to think I didn't feel things," he added. "Turns out, I just didn't trust them." "I now? No. I'm trying." And then he did something he'd never done before. He reached out. Slowly, deliberately, and he tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, not afraid. Just learning. "You're not afraid anymore?" she whispered. "I am," he said, "but you make the fear quieter." Her heart cracked at the edges. He leaned down, rested his forehead against hers, the space between them erased by trust rather than force. And there, under a stormy Seattle sky, the boy who couldn't be touched held on. Chapter 4. The first time he reached back. The storm knocked out the power just after 11 p.m. It started with a flicker light, stuttering like nervous laughter, then went black all at once. The estate fell into silence, the kind that settles when even the electronics stop humming. Lena blinked in the sudden dark, the rain outside still tapping the windows like fingers on glass. Somewhere down the hallway she heard Esther's voice call out faintly, "This better not cancel my bridge game tomorrow." Lena grabbed a flashlight from the guest closet, padding quietly down the hallway in socks. Just before she reached the stairs, she noticed a faint sliver of warm light glowing under the door of the library. She knocked once. "Noah?" The door opened, slow and careful. He was standing there in the dark, lit only by the orange flicker of the fireplace he'd lit hours earlier. His face was half in shadow, half golden, and for a second, Lena forgot every reason she was supposed to be cautious. "Power's out," she said. "I noticed," he replied dryly. "I've got a flashlight. I prefer this." She stepped inside, letting the door whisper shut behind her. Books lined the walls like silent witnesses. The fire crackled softly. The storm had lost its fury and was now just rain. Gentle, steady, almost like a lullaby. "Esther's fine," he asked. Complaining. "So, yes." He almost smiled. Lena wandered toward the window. "You read in here?" "On time. Reading the books. I wear gloves." She turned to face him. "Do you ever just want to forget the glove?" He was quiet for a long time. "I used to think they protected me," he said. "But lately, I think they just kept me from healing." She let that sit. When she sat on the leather couch near the fire, he didn't stop her. When she kicked her feet up beneath her and pulled a throw blanket over her knees, he didn't speak. Then slowly he crossed the room and sat on the far end of the couch. Not close, but not far. She could see him watching the flames, eyes flickering gold. "I used to sit in front of fires like this as a kid," she said. He glanced at her. "Before my mom left, she used to hum old Sam Cooke songs when the power went out. Told me stories about the stars while we waited for the lights to come back." He nodded, just once. "Do you have any good memories?" she asked softly. Noah didn't speak. "But then, I remember a dog," he said finally. "Dog?" "I had one, briefly, before I was taken to the clinic. She was a stray that wandered into the estate. I fed her bacon under the estate. I followed me everywhere, slept next to my door." Lena smiled. "What happened to her?" "I gave her away after I left." "I'm sorry. I think I named her Joy." The way he said it, like a secret he'd forgotten he still knew, made something ache in her chest. The fire cracked louder. Outside, the rain softened. And then, without warning, Lena dozed off. She hadn't meant to. But the warmth of the fire, the comfort of the room, the exhaustion of days stacked on her shoulders, it all pressed her down gently until her eyes fluttered shut. Noah noticed before she did. The slow tilt of her head, the shift of her breath. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat in the quiet. And then, in the space between firelight and silence, he did something no one would have believed. He moved closer. Barely a foot, maybe less. And then, he reached out. His hand hovered in the air for a long time, trembling slightly, as if the gesture itself required more courage than anything he'd done in business or war. Then, he brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. She didn't stir. He let his fingers rest there, just for a second, warm against her skin. It didn't hurt. It didn't make him recoil. It just was. And for the first time in 23 years, Noah Whitaker touched someone, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Sometime in the night, Lena stirred. The fire had died to embers. Her blanket had been tugged up to her shoulders, and the pillow beneath her head. She looked around. He was gone. But something in her chest fluttered, not fear, not confusion. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. Chapter 5. Your past isn't a weapon. The Westbrook Hotel gleamed like a promise, all marble floors and champagne smiles. Crystal chandeliers hung like stars over Seattle's elite, and the ballroom buzzed with the subtle electricity of wealth on parade. Lena adjusted the strap of her navy dress for the 100th time, suddenly missing her barista apron and the clatter of mugs. She was still getting used to heels, still uncomfortable with silk, but Grandma Esther had insisted. "You're not a charity case," she'd said, pinning a sapphire brooch to Lena's dress with a wink. "You're family. Show them how the Whitakers are supposed to walk into a room, head up, heart whole." And so, Lena had come. Not for the cameras, not for the wine, but for Noah. He was already there, standing by the gallery wall like he didn't belong in his own event. Sparkle suit, no gloves. He was alone, until she crossed the room to him. "You showed up," he said, his voice low but softer than she expected. "You asked me to?" He looked at her, then really looked, and the quiet in his eyes made something inside her fall still. "Look," he started, then stopped. "Why?" she teased. "Rule," he said, like something I never thought I'd be allowed to touch. She could have melted right there. But the night had other plans. They made it through the first hour without incident. Noah gave a brief speech about the new sensory rehabilitation wing he was funding. "For children with emotional and neurological trauma," he said, glancing once at Lena and then quickly away. People clapped. Flutes of champagne clinked. But then came the whisper. A snake in a tuxedo. Miles Whitaker. Noah's cousin. COO of Whitaker Dynamics. All teeth and calculated charm. He slid beside Lena near the silent auction table, drink in hand, grin sharp as a knife. "You clean up well," he said, voice dripping with condescension. Lena smiled without showing teeth. "You don't." Miles chuckled. "Noah's always had strange tastes, but I have to admit, you're his boldest decision yet." "Why are you trying to say?" "I'm saying," he leaned in, "everyone in this room knows what you are. A PR play. A walking fairy tale for the Whitaker Foundation. The poor girl who tamed the CEO who can't stand to be touched." Lena's fists curled at her sides. "Tell me," he continued, "how long do you think it'll last? Once the novelty wears off? Once the headlines fade?" "You're disgusting." "Sweetheart, I'm honest." A hush fell over the room. Because Noah had arrived, eyes locked on Miles, voice cold and crystal clear. "Walk away," he said. Miles straightened. "Just making conversation. You humiliated her in front of 100 people." Miles shrugged. "She's tough. She can take it. But she shouldn't have to." The words sliced through the ballroom like a wind off the sound. Lena turned. Noah's eyes were on her, steady, open, unafraid. "I need everyone's attention," he said, louder now. The guest paused mid-sip, mid-whisper, mid-snicker. He took a breath. "I have a condition," he said, lifting his hands. "I haven't spoken about it publicly because I didn't believe I had to, but tonight I realized silence only serves the people who weaponize your past." He looked at Miles. "I was diagnosed with sensory trauma disorder when I was a child," Noah continued. "For most of my life, physical touch made me feel like I was drowning. My condition isn't shameful, but for years I treated it like it was, because I was afraid of being seen as broken." He looked at Lena now. "Then someone touched me, and I didn't flinch. Not because I was cured, but because I finally trusted someone not to hurt me." Gasps, murmurs, but Lena heard none of it. Because Noah was crossing the room toward her. And when he reached her, he took her hand. No gloves. No hesitation. "I'm not broken," he said. "And neither is she." After the gala, they sat in the back of the limo in silence. Lena's fingers still rested in his. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Lloyd, I did." "Why?" "Because I won't let anyone use my past to make you feel small." She turned to him. "What if they laugh? What if the press twists it?" He reached for her other hand. "I can twist the story," he said, "but they can't touch the truth." Linda blinked hard, then whispered, "What truth?" "I'm not afraid of being seen anymore." "Why?" "Because you looked at me," he said, "and didn't see damage. You saw human." Lena leaned in then, forehead to his. And in the quiet space between their lips and the city passing by, she whispered the words she hadn't dared say until now. "I see you, Noah. All of you." And for once, finally, he let himself believe it. Chapter 6. I wanted you before I knew why. The rooftop garden at the Whitaker estate wasn't grand like the ballroom or curated like the West Terrace. It was quiet, wild, forgotten in the way grief sometimes grows into beauty when no one's looking. Lena stood barefoot in the grass, the stars hiding behind slow-moving clouds. Somewhere below, Seattle murmured its late-night secrets, cars passing, sirens fading, laughter spilling from windows they'd never know. But she shouldn't have been here. But her hands were shaking, because in them was a folder. And inside that folder was everything she didn't want to believe. Printed emails, voice transcripts, a memo with Grandma Esther's signature. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't fate. Esther hadn't just thanked her for saving her life that day. She had planned for Lena to be there, had engineered the moment down to timing, location, even which barista schedule would intersect with her driver's route. And worse, Noah had known. And from the second week, from the moment Lena had unpacked her bag in the guest room, he'd known she was part of a scheme, a plan, a manipulation dressed up in gratitude. "You know," said a voice behind her. She turned. Noah stood in the doorway, no jacket, just a dark Henley that clung to his frame like honesty. "How long?" she asked. His jaw tensed. "Since the hospital." She swallowed. "And you said nothing?" "I didn't want to lose you." "You never had me?" He flinched, not physically, emotionally. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I tried, the night of the power outage. You put a blanket around me and said nothing?" "I was afraid." "Of what?" she snapped. "That I'd leave if I found out I was part of a Whitaker experiment?" "Night." His voice cracked then. "That I'd already fallen for you, and you'd realize I didn't deserve you." The words halted her. He stepped closer. "You weren't a plan to me, Lena. You were a miracle. You touched me when no one else could. And I don't mean physically. I mean everything. The way you saw me, the way you listened, the way you made me believe I wasn't some ghost with a title." Tears blurred her eyes. "Then why didn't you stop it?" she whispered. "Why didn't you let me walk away the moment you knew?" He stepped closer, carefully. "Because I wanted you before I even understood why, before I knew what it meant to want someone." "I trusted you," she whispered. "I broke that trust," he said. "I know." She looked away. He waited. And then, softly, "Ask me what I'm most afraid of." Lena didn't answer. "I'm not afraid of being touched anymore, Lena. I'm afraid of not being able to touch you." The silence cracked like lightning inside her chest. Because even in betrayal, even in this wound, she wanted to believe him. And that terrified her more than anything else. She turned to go. But his voice stopped her. "You said once that you weren't here to fix me," he said. "And I believed you. But Lena, you didn't fix me. You made me want to be someone who didn't need fixing anymore." She didn't say goodbye. She didn't need to. Because her silence spoke louder than any door ever could. Back in her room, Lena sat on the edge of the bed. The folder lay on the floor. So did her faith. And she stared at her hands. The same ones that had saved Esther. The same ones that had touched Noah's face in the dark. The same ones that now shook not from rage but from heartbreak. Because it wasn't the lie that hurt most. It was the fact that for the first time in her life, She had let herself believe that someone like him, guarded, brilliant, untouchable, could fall for someone like her. Not because she was part of the plan, but because she was real. Chapter 7. I didn't ask to love you. Lena hadn't been back to her old apartment in weeks. It still smelled like burnt toast and lavender dryer sheets, and the heater still groaned like a dying animal in the wall. She curled up on the faded couch, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, ignoring the emails piling up on her phone. She couldn't sleep. Not because of the lie, but because of the man behind it. The way Noah had looked at her last night, like a man drowning in a flood of his own making. She didn't know whether she wanted to scream at him or run to him. But she did neither. She just sat and waited for the ache to pass. It didn't, okay. Not even when the knock came. 3 soft raps. The music. She knew it was him before she opened the door. Noah stood in the hallway, dressed in the same dark coat he'd worn that night in the rain. No umbrella, no gloves. His hair was a mess. His eyes were tired. But it was the thing in his hand that made her breath catch. Small velvet box, worn at the corners, like it had been carried for years without being opened. He held it out. She didn't take it. What is it? My mother's necklace, he said. The only thing she left me before she disappeared. I've never given it to anyone, not even Esther. I swallowed. She used to tell me stories about it, he continued, voice low. Said it wasn't valuable, but it was proof someone had loved me once. I haven't touched it in years. Only now? She asked. Because I can't give you the truth in a perfect bow. I can't undo what Esther did or what I didn't say. But I can give you this, the one thing I've never let go of. She looked at the box, then at him. You lied, she said quietly. I did. You let me believe it was fate. I wanted to believe that too, he whispered. I wanted it so badly I stopped caring whether it was honest. But Lena, what came after wasn't planned. You weren't supposed to mean anything, and you ended up meaning everything. Tears stung her eyes. I didn't ask to love you, he said, voice trembling. I didn't even know how. But you made me feel like I could be more than what they did to me, more than the scars, more than the silence. My silence fell. And then, very softly, she reached for the box. Her fingers brushed his. He flinched. Not away, but toward. And in that smallest of movements, she felt it. Trust. Raw, unpolished, earned. When she opened the box, inside was a delicate silver chain, nothing flashy, nothing ornate, but the pendant hanging from it shimmered faintly in the light, like something that had witnessed sorrow and stayed intact. Why this? She asked. Because I want you to have the one thing I believed would be mine forever, he said. Because I want to start over, not as the man who tricked you, but the man who learned how to be honest because of you. She looked at him then. To Noah Whitaker. Billionaire. Orphan. Broken boy in a fort. And she realized he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking to be seen. I'm still angry, she said. I deserve that. I don't know if I can trust you again. I'll earn it. She touched the pendant gently, then whispered, Do you love me, Noah? He stepped closer, laid his hand over hers. I didn't know how to love anyone, he said, but when you left, everything in me started dying in reverse. I think that's what love is, coming back to life. She let herself cry then, not because she was weak,
because she finally knew this man who had spent 23 years afraid of touch had just handed her the most fragile thing he owned, his heart. And for once, she was ready to hold it.
Chapter 8. The police department, the one with the history book. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that didn't warn you. No flash, no thunder, just a quiet crack right down the center of everything. Noah had been running on fumes for weeks. Press junkets, quarterly investor battles, and the looming fight to regain full control of the Whitaker board. He hadn't slept in 2 nights, hadn't eaten in 1, and when the chest pain started, he ignored it the same way he always had. Until he couldn't. Until his knees hit the floor of the boardroom, and the silence that followed felt louder than any scream. The hospital buzzed in that strange, sterile rhythm of controlled panic. Machines beeping, sneakers squeaking, monitors blinking their silent Morse codes. Lena ran down the hallway like her feet didn't belong to her. She hadn't heard it from him, but she heard it from Esther. A call, a choked voice, just 5 words. Noah's in the hospital, now. Lena didn't stop to ask questions, she just ran. When she got there, the nurse hesitated. "Only family," she said. "I am family," Lena whispered. She didn't have proof. She just eyes full of panic and a heart that had already cracked open too wide to close again. The nurse looked at her, then nodded. 5. He's stable, but he's not responding." Lena didn't wait. Noah was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, still in the same charcoal dress shirt from earlier, now wrinkled and clinging to his skin. His hands trembled in his lap. He wasn't hooked up to machines, but he looked more broken than she'd ever seen him. "No?" she whispered. He didn't look up, didn't move. It was like the light in him had short-circuited. "Hey," she said, softer now. "I'm here." Until nothing. She moved closer, careful, like approaching a wild animal, one that had once been gentle, but learned too many times that touch meant pain. "I talked to Esther," she said. "She's fine, just mad at the vending machine." Still no response. His shoulders curled inward, like he was trying to fold himself smaller than the pain. Lena knelt in front of him. Her voice broke. "Noah, please look at me." Then, in breath. 2. And slowly, his eyes lifted. Empty, haunted, but searching. "Why are you here?" he rasped. "Because you are," she said. "Because this time, I'm not walking away." He blinked, and something in him shook. "You said once," he whispered, "that you weren't here to fix me." "I'm not." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm reminding you that you're not alone in this body anymore." His breath stuttered. She reached for his hand. He flinched, but didn't pull away. She wrapped her fingers around his. Arm, warm, unmoving. His eyes filled. And then, without sound, he fell forward. His forehead met her shoulder. And for the first time, Noah Whitaker let himself be held. He didn't fight it, didn't mask it, didn't apologize. He just wept. Years of silence, of sterilized emotion, of gloved hands and guarded goodbyes, poured out like floodwater bursting through cracked glass. And Lena didn't let go. Not once. Later, when the tears had faded and the silence had softened, Noah spoke again. And his voice was sandpaper. Quiet. "I used to think the pain was my body protecting me." She looked up. "And now?" "When I think, maybe it was waiting for the right person to unlearn it with." She squeezed his hand. "You're not broken," she whispered. "You were just never shown how to heal." His eyes closed. A single tear slid down. And when he opened them again, his fingers reached for her face. No flinch. No permission. Just quiet grace. And the boy who once flinched at love finally reached for it. Chapter 9. Was mine before he knew. The courthouse air tasted like old wood and tension. Lena sat near the back. Her fingers curled around a manila folder that didn't just hold paper. It held Noah's truth. Esther sat beside her in a navy pantsuit and a pearl brooch shaped like a lightning bolt. "Don't let the silence fool you," she whispered. "The room always shifts right before a storm." Across the aisle, Miles Whitaker smirked. He had swaggered into the courtroom that morning like a man who already saw his name on the company letterhead. He'd brought everything: lawyers in sleek suits, statements, whisper campaigns. But he didn't know Lena had brought the one thing he hadn't planned for: proof. Noah entered last. No gloves. No mask. Only his silence. But this time, it wasn't armor. It was clarity. He sat beside Lena. Didn't speak. But he reached for her hand under the table. A gesture so simple, so unremarkable, yet for him, it was a revolution. Lena turned to him. "You ready?" He nodded. "Because of you." The judge looked down at the documents with furrowed brows. "Miles Whitaker," she said, "you're accused of embezzlement, corporate sabotage, and defamation through falsified medical records." Miles barely blinked. "My cousin," he said smoothly, "has a long-documented sensory trauma condition. I simply question his fitness to lead." Lena stood. "I'd like to submit Exhibit D." All eyes turned. She walked the folder to the front of the courtroom, heels clicking with the kind of resolve that can't be faked. Inside, private messages, time-stamped video footage, and an audio recording of Miles instructing a junior partner to plant false data in Noah's file. "Care to explain this?" she asked. Miles stuttered. For the first time all morning, he didn't have a line ready. It unraveled quickly after that. The junior partner flipped. The digital forensics team confirmed the timestamps. Miles's board allies began to shift uncomfortably. By the end of the day, the vote was called. Noah stood at the front of. His speech was short. "I am not a man defined by what was done to me," he said. "I am defined by what I choose to do now, with clarity, with compassion, and without fear." Then he turned and looked directly at Lena. "I choose to lead, and I choose to love, not in spite of my past, but because of it." Emotion passed, unanimously. Noah Whitaker was reinstated as CEO. Miles was escorted out. And Lena didn't cry. Oh, she didn't need to. Because as Noah walked toward her, hand outstretched, the room fell quiet, not because of shock, but because everyone could feel it. This wasn't just victory. This was healing. That night, on the rooftop of the Whitaker Tower, Noah stood beside Lena under a sky the color of forgiveness. And wearing gloves. And she wasn't wearing fear. "You once said you didn't know how to want someone," Lena whispered. "I remember. So tell me now, what do you want?" He turned to her, brushed a curl from her cheek, and said, "In every version of my life, in every ending, I was once too afraid to imagine." Chapter 10. The Man Who Could Be Touched. The sun rose slow and gold over the Whitaker garden, painting the roses in soft amber light. Noah stood barefoot in the dew-soaked grass, sipping black coffee from a mug that simply read, "Human." Esther had bought it as a. He never stopped using it. The old oak tree beside the fountain rustled gently in the breeze. It had once been just a fixture in the landscape, a symbol of permanence in a world built to change. Now, it meant something else. Because Lena was there. Kneeling in the soil, bare hands covered in dirt, planting something new. Noah watched her. She was humming under her breath. Something soft, something old, something his mother might have sung before the world taught her to stop. "Need help?" he asked. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. "You touch soil, Whitaker, and I'm making you dig the whole bed." "I'll risk it." He crouched beside her, fingers brushing the edge of a root. She glanced sideways. "And gloves. Armor." She smiled. He picked up a trowel and dug beside her. Fair, no storm. Just quiet, willing closeness. Like it had always been meant to be, this simple. Later, they walked the cliffs near the water. It had become their place, an old path behind the estate that wound its way toward the sea. The tide was low that morning, and seagulls spun lazy circles in the sky. Lena walked ahead, hair tugged by the wind. Noah lagged behind, because he was holding something small in his palm. Not a ring? Not yet? Just a folded slip of paper, one he'd carried for months, crumpled and creased from living in his coat pocket. It read, "Don't let your past keep you from being touched by the present." He had written it the night Lena moved into the estate. He never showed it to anyone. Till now. She turned when he didn't catch up. "What's in your hand?" she called over the wind. He smiled. "Something that used to be just mine." He closed the distance between them, took her hand and pressed the paper into her palm. As she unfolded it, "We read it." Then looked up, tears already blooming in her eyes. "I don't need a perfect proposal," she said. "Good," he whispered, stepping closer, "because I don't have one." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a simple silver ring. No diamond. Just a small infinity symbol carved into the inside. "I don't need to be whole to love you," he said, "but somehow, loving you made me feel like I already was." She couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. He knelt in the sand, held the ring between fingers that once trembled at human contact. "Lena Carter, will you make my life the kind that doesn't flinch anymore?" She dropped to her knees, kissed him before the tears fell, and whispered, "Okay." That night, in the house that had once been silent, Noah stood by the window, watching the moon cast silver over the grass. Lena came up behind him, wrapped her arms around him from behind. And he didn't freeze. He leaned back into her, like he was finally home in his own body. Like he had waited all his life for this very kind of touch. The love that waited 20 years. The wind was soft that day, and the kind that carried more than air. It carried memory. In the Whitaker garden by the sea, where wild roses tangled with laughter and white petals floated down like snow, Lena stood beneath the oak tree in a dress the color of dawn. And Noah? Noah waited for her. No gloves. No fear. Just open hands and a heart that had finally stopped hiding. They said their vows beneath the branches. No orchestra, no audience, just Esther sniffling behind her sunglasses and the sound of waves folding gently into shore. "I used to think love was a risk," Noah whispered, holding Lena's hands. "Now I know the real risk is never letting yourself be loved." She didn't answer with words. Just the touch of her forehead to his, the same way she had the night he told her who he was and who he was still learning to be. Later that evening, after the last candle had burned low and the guests had gone, Lena found Noah sitting on the garden steps alone. The sky was deep purple. The stores were quiet. She sat beside him in her bare feet. "Why are you out here?" she asked softly. He held up his hand. "I was just remembering what it felt like when I couldn't do this." She watched as he flexed his fingers. The same hands that used to shake, now steady. He turned to her. "I don't know what healed me," he said. "Maybe it wasn't a moment. Maybe it was every time you stayed." Lena leaned into his shoulder. "We don't heal by erasing the past," she whispered. "We heal by building something strong enough to carry it." He nodded. And under that endless, open sky, they stayed like that, two people who once believed love was out of reach, now wrapped in it, like morning sun on old skin. Some loves aren't loud. They don't arrive in a rush of passion or declarations. They come slowly, gently, like fingers brushing skin for the first time without fear. Noah Whitaker didn't need to be fixed. He needed to be believed. And Lena Carter didn't need to be rescued. She needed someone to see her not as a chapter, but as the whole story. Together, they didn't build a perfect love. They built a real one. One where pain had a place, but so did peace. One where silence wasn't a barrier, but a bridge. One where the man who couldn't be touched finally was. If you've ever loved someone quietly, or waited years to be held in the way your heart deserves, leave a light in the comments below. Someone out there might need the warmth you've been carrying all this time. Because even after all the silence, touch still knows the way home.